The silence was a thick, suffocating blanket, but I didn't stir when her voice sliced through it. Not because I hadn't registered her words, but because they were a familiar echo. 3 times already I'd processed the raw data, once in a hurried text, once in a hushed call I'd overheard, and once from a travel app notification glaring from her forgotten tablet screen. So as she lingered by the entryway, adjusting a pearl earring, her tone as detached as a weather report, "I won't be long. Just a dinner out." I remained motionless, my gaze fixed on a fictional feed, pretending her casual betrayal wasn't already etched into my memory, pretending I hadn't memorized his name, hadn't seen the too intimate selfie from the previous weekend. She likely believed this was the first tremor, the initial shockwave. But she was wrong. This wasn't the beginning. It was merely the inevitable crescendo. The true start? 10 nights prior, at precisely 2:13 a.m., I'd risen for water and found her sprawled on the living room sofa, phone still glowing in her hand. One tap, one fleeting glance. That was all it took. His name was Zachary. He called her Blaze. She'd once sworn she detested that nickname from an old flame. Now the messages weren't even hidden. She'd simply ceased to care if I found them. Tonight, however, held a different weight. Tonight she was testing the boundaries. Her silent question, "Are you man enough to stop me?" I wasn't, not in the way she anticipated. No furious outburst, no desperate pleas, no shattered porcelain, no blocked exits. Instead I rose, a quiet resolve hardening my spine. I walked into the kitchen, retrieved a ceramic dish, her favorite lamb stew, meticulously prepared 2 nights before, and placed it gently on the counter. Beside it, I slid a folded slip of paper, something I'd carried in my wallet for 3 days, gathering silent courage. "Read this after your dinner," I stated, my voice steady, before stepping out the front door into the indifferent night. She didn't return that night. Of course she didn't. There was no surprise in the quiet of the apartment, only a confirmation. I even heard the faint creak of the garden gate at 1:42 a.m., the familiar signal of a clandestine arrival or departure. Still, I didn't stir from the sofa. My eyes were fixed on the empty casserole dish, a solitary meal consumed in the stark silence that now defined the dissolution of my marriage. The next morning she floated in as if nothing had happened, interrupting my routine of feeding our aging tabby. "Morning," she chirped, breezy and unburdened, as if returning from a yoga class. I handed her coffee, an ingrained habit, still me, Caleb, still the one who ensures her almond milk is frothed to perfection. Then her gaze fell upon the note, now unfolded on the kitchen island. She squinted, a flicker of confusion. "You wanted me to read this?" I didn't offer a syllable. I simply took a sip of my own coffee, my expression a calm, unyielding mask. Finally, she picked it up. Her hands remained steady at first, but I watched her jaw clench, her left thumb beginning its telltale twitch. A nervous habit. The note was concise, devoid of melodrama. It simply stated, "Cease the charade, Marla. I know about Zachary, your work retreats, the texts, the pictures, the hotel receipts. I will not contend for someone who has already departed. But before you leave, understand this. You are not the sole architect of deception here." She slowly lifted her eyes, and for the first time in years, she was utterly speechless. That silence, that was my oxygen. She was finally adrift, lost to the currents of her own making. Are you suggesting you cheated too?" She stammered, visibly stunned. I offered a dry chuckle, not out of amusement, but from the stark predictability of her reaction. "No," I replied, "but I did say I wouldn't contend for someone who had already departed. That includes you. That includes your possessions. And that includes our shared accounts." Now a genuine tremor of concern crossed her features. I continued, my voice measured, soft, echoing the tender tones she once used with me in happier times. "The joint credit card? Canceled 2 days ago. The apartment lease? Already renegotiated, solely in my name. Your personal items? Stored in a secure unit off Cedar Lane. And that career you claim to adore so much, perhaps a call to human resources might be in order. This is the exact moment everything she thought she controlled began to crumble. Her face fractured. You contacted my employer? I offered no response. She no longer deserved answers. I had existed in a hazy fog for too long, silently apologizing for my presence, for being too reserved, too compliant, too predictable. But no longer would I be a spectator in my own life. While she pursued clandestine rendezvous, I had meticulously learned to become invisible by design. I had effectively vanished from her world long before she ever noticed my absence. She stared at me as if I'd grown an extra head. The same woman who, just the night before, had effortlessly slipped on her favorite heels to meet another man, now reacted as if I had committed the ultimate betrayal. "What did you do?" she repeated, a desperate mantra, unable to grasp the profound repercussions of her own choices. I calmly set my mug down and produced a small padded envelope. I slid it across the table toward her. "You'll want to open this after you've spoken with HR," I advised. "Not before. Just trust me on that." Of course, she didn't open it immediately. She stood, arms tightly crossed, jaw clenched, that veneer of false confidence still stubbornly clinging. "You had no right." "I had every right," I interjected, my voice unwavering. "I wasn't the one sneaking out. I wasn't the one meticulously planning deceptions behind a partner's back. I was the one covering the household expenses while you were sending heart emojis to a man named Zachary, who, by the way, has a documented history of disorderly conduct in 3 separate jurisdictions." That detail visibly rattled her. I wasn't supposed to know about his bar brawls or his prior evictions, but I had the digital paper trail, receipts, screenshots, background check reports, a meticulously organized USB drive containing every shred of documented evidence. Her silence stretched an eternity. Then she did the one thing I hadn't anticipated. She laughed, a brittle, disbelieving sound. "You're truly that pathetic? You ran a background check on him?" "I did far more than that," I corrected, and I had. The moment I grasped her emotional departure, I ceased trying to salvage the relationship and shifted to self-preservation. Bank statements, consolidated, covert email accounts, recovered, her old tablet. She'd neglected to factory reset it, and it had automatically synced every photograph and message to my personal cloud drive. That's how I knew their first night together was spent at a boutique hotel an hour from her sister's residence. The very same night she claimed to be too unwell to travel for our anniversary weekend. She attempted to invert the narrative, naturally, accusing me of espionage, of violating her privacy, of sabotaging her career. But the truth was simpler. She had incinerated the bridge. I merely ensured there was no possibility of her crossing back. Then came the true unraveling. She finally opened the envelope. Inside lay a printed letter, not from me, but from Zachary. It was dated 3 days prior. A terse goodbye. He declared he never intended for things to escalate to this degree, confessing he was unsettled by her burgeoning obsession. He admitted she had unnerved him when she began discussing leaving me, moving in, envisioning a fresh start. She reread the letter twice, her face drained of all color. He had ghosted her. Ready to learn the shocking truth? That was the precise moment everything irrevocably shifted. The realization struck her with visceral force. She had detonated our shared life for a man who never had any intention of staying. And I simply sat there, sipping my now cold coffee, watching her carefully constructed mask disintegrate completely. She sank slowly into the chair, as if her legs had suddenly lost the will to support her. Zachary's letter trembled in her grasp, and I watched her lips move silently as she absorbed his farewell once more. Her confidence, that breezy, unbothered smirk she wore like expensive perfume, had evaporated. Now she appeared hollow, like someone awakening from a dream only to discover it was a self-inflicted nightmare. "I didn't think he'd," she whispered mostly to herself. "He said he told me he wanted to escape everything. To start over, I thought." "You believed he loved you?" I asked. My voice remained level. I didn't even look at her, simply posed the question she desperately wanted to avoid answering. "He exploited you for attention, Marla. For a cheap thrill, just as you used me for stability. No, she snapped, a sudden spark of defensiveness. No, that's unfair. I never used you. Then what was I said, finally turning to meet her gaze. The man who provided a safe harbor for your life so you could recklessly chase danger behind my back? The husband who picked up your dry cleaning while you were in hotel rooms, texting him about how boring I was? Her mouth opened, but no sound escaped. I stood, walked to the drawer beside the fridge, and retrieved another envelope. This one was noticeably thicker. She didn't reach for it when I placed it before her. She merely stared at it as if it were radioactive. I wasn't going to give you this, I stated, but now that your fantasy has imploded, I want you to comprehend the full scope of what comes next. Inside were copies of our joint account statements, the ones I had quietly systematically drained over the past 6 weeks, redirecting the funds into a separate savings account solely under my name. There were printouts of the rental agreement, now legally transferred to me, screenshots of her damning text messages, and copies of the legal paperwork I had filed 2 days prior, for separation, not divorce. Not yet. I wanted her to linger in that desolate space between losing me and being unwanted by him. I wanted her to feel every excruciating facet of it. Just when I thought the scene couldn't possibly grow more surreal, her phone buzzed. She glanced down, and I watched the panic instantly bloom across her face. Her hand flew to her mouth. She turned the screen toward me, like a child presenting a failing grade to a disappointed parent. It was a message from her sister. Zachary contacted Dad, said you're unstable. What on earth is going on? I raised an eyebrow. Didn't realize he was so intimately acquainted with your family. He isn't, she hissed, her voice sharp with disbelief. I never even mentioned their names to him. How would he know? But she halted mid-sentence. Her eyes darted toward the hallway, then to the front door, then back to me. That's when it truly dawned on her. She hadn't merely lost control of her secret life. It was now bleeding into the very aspects she had so carefully guarded, into the family who believed she was working late, into the reputation she once valued more than me. You think he's going to stop with just ghosting you, I said. You welcomed him into your world. He will walk through it as many times as he desires. She shot to her feet as if poised to bolt from the house, only to realize she had nowhere to go. That particular moment, watching her grasp the utter absence of a safe haven, not with me, not with Zachary, not even within herself, I unexpectedly found myself enjoying it. She began to pace, one hand clutching her phone as if it held all the answers, the other tugging at her hair as if she could physically force herself out of this predicament. I simply observed her, quietly. Not because I had nothing more to say, but because I knew silence now made her far more uncomfortable than any scream ever could. Marla had always commanded conversations, narratives, people, until now. I didn't think it would escalate this far, she mumbled. Escalate this far, I repeated, blinking slowly. You were meticulously constructing an entirely new life with someone who didn't even use his authentic surname, Marla. You handed him the blueprint to everything, your work schedule, your therapist's name, your family's details. He swore he was serious about me, she retorted. He told me I was the only genuine thing in his life. I let out a soft laugh, the kind that held more weariness than amusement. He told 3 other women the exact same thing. You weren't special to him. You were simply next. She flinched. I didn't derive pleasure from hurting her, but I was no longer willing to shield her from the unvarnished truth. Not anymore. Then she did something utterly unexpected. She reached for my hand. Caleb, she whispered, her voice trembling, I know I made a colossal mistake. I know I hurt you deeply, but please, can we just pause? Figure this out. This doesn't have to be the end. We were good, you and I. We can reclaim that. I gently pulled my hand away. You weren't saying that when you were lying in someone else's hotel bed, texting him about how boring I am, about how I cry too easily, about how I don't make you feel like a woman. I delivered each word slowly, deliberately, wanting every syllable to sear into her memory as deeply as those texts had burned into mine. You never imagined I'd see those, did you? Her shoulders slumped. I was angry. I was confused. I didn't mean all of it. You meant enough of it, I interrupted. And you didn't falter once, then beg for forgiveness. You persisted. You built an entire separate existence with him. Now that it's crumbled, you're attempting to crawl back to what you believe was guaranteed. But I am no longer your safety net. Not anymore. She looked as though she might simply collapse there. For a fleeting second, a perverse part of me wished to hold her, to murmur, "It's okay, even if it wasn't." But I forcibly swallowed that impulse. That was the very part of me that had kept me trapped for years. The fixer, the perpetual forgiver, the man who allowed himself to be trampled so others wouldn't confront the weight of their own decisions. No more. She wiped her face with her sleeve, smudging her mascara into a dark, bruised smear. "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked quietly. "You already packed a weekend bag," I reminded her. "Take it, use it, stay with your sister, or perhaps check into one of those hotels you've grown so fond of. It makes no difference to me. What if I truly have nowhere? Then I suggest you swiftly determine a solution," I stated, mirroring the resolve I'd found the night I unearthed everything. I walked into the bedroom and closed the door behind me. Not a slam, just a firm, definitive click. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, my hands trembling. My heart wasn't cold, it was shattered, but I knew that whatever came next would unfold on my terms, not hers. And that night, she didn't sleep in the house. For the first time in years, the bed was entirely mine, and finally I slept. A knock sounded at the door around 8:30 a.m. I hadn't even brewed coffee yet. The profound silence in the house still felt alien without her presence. No humming from the bathroom, no muttered complaints about a missing phone charger. But this quiet was better, cleaner. I opened the door, half expecting a package, or perhaps Marla, returning prematurely. It wasn't her, it was her father, Gareth. Gareth stood there, hands tucked into his coat pockets, his eyes tired but sharp. I hadn't seen him in months. His visits had dwindled over the past year, and now I understood why. Perhaps she had been diligently avoiding questions that might expose her deceptions. "May I come in?" he asked, his tone not cold, but certainly lacking warmth. I stepped aside and nodded. "Of course." He entered with the air of someone who already knew something was amiss, not seeking surprise, but simply confirmation. "She came by the house late last night," he began. "Didn't say much. Just cried, said she'd ruined everything, then left before we could ask any questions. Her sister called this morning. She's not answering." I leaned against the kitchen counter, crossing my arms. "She's alive, just humiliated. She'll reactivate her phone when she believes she has regained some measure of control." He raised an eyebrow. "You sound finished." "I am." Gareth nodded slowly. Then, in the particular way only a father-in-law who once genuinely liked you can ask, he inquired, "What exactly did she do?" I could have prevaricated, could have said it was complicated, or that we simply drifted apart, the convenient platitudes people deploy to protect reputations. But I was wary of protecting things that had never protected me. "She cheated," I stated, my voice low, "multiple times, with a man who's likely halfway through dismantling someone else's life by now. She left for a date last week, as if it were a simple dinner reservation. Didn't even flinch when she said it." He didn't react immediately, merely sinking onto the edge of the sofa and exhaling slowly through his nose, rubbing his hands together as if to ward off a chill. "She was always restless," he murmured. "Even as a child, always chasing novelty, always seeking excitement. Your stability, Caleb. It probably felt like a confinement after a while." "Funny," I responded. "She used to call it home." That landed. He looked at me, a sharp flash of guilt in his eyes, as if he recognized her behavior, perhaps because, just perhaps, it mirrored something he himself had once done. "Do you want her back?" he asked after a long, heavy silence. I considered it. The years, the shared memories, the soft mornings when she would trace patterns on my chest with her finger, whispering that she couldn't imagine being anywhere else. And then I recalled the messages, Zachary, the casual smirk she'd worn when announcing her date, as if it were an innocuous outing rather than a torpedo aimed at the very core of what we had painstakingly built. "No," I finally said. I don't want someone who only looks at me when they've exhausted all their other, more exciting distractions. Gareth nodded. He stood, walked to the door, and hesitated, his hand resting on the knob. If she comes to me again, what should I tell her? Tell her I'm not angry, I said. Tell her I won't fight her. But also tell her she doesn't get to rewrite the narrative this time. Not to her family, not to her friends, and certainly not to herself. He gave me a long, quiet look, as if weighing whether he respected me more or less than he had 5 minutes earlier. Then he departed, and for the first time, I realized this wasn't merely the dissolution of a marriage. It was the absolute end of the version of myself that had allowed everything to slide. She returned on a Tuesday, not with a tear-streaked face or a subdued apology, but with a firm knock and the kind of aggressive energy one expects from a gambler who's just lost a bet and demands a rematch. I didn't answer the door immediately. I was upstairs in the guest room, the one I had meticulously converted into my own private space. A clean slate, devoid of framed wedding photos or shared dresser drawers. Just a desk, a cot, and profound quiet. The knock came again, sharper this time. I finally opened the door. Marla stood there in a hoodie I didn't recognize, her hair pulled back, face bare of makeup. She looked tired but not broken, not humbled, merely inconvenienced. That told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't here to reconcile. She was here to attempt to reset the narrative. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice cool, collected. I stepped aside, offering no verbal reply. She walked in as if she still resided there, as if nothing had been incinerated, as if this were a temporary pause, not a definitive ending. She sat on the edge of the sofa, crossed her legs, and surveyed the living room as though inspecting the damage after a storm. "I've been staying with Dana," she said after a lengthy silence. I offered no response. "She's dreadfully judgmental," Marla added, forcing a brittle laugh. "She thinks I've completely lost my mind." "She's not wrong," I conceded, folding my arms. "But not because you cheated, because you foolishly believed I'd simply wait here, indefinitely." That landed. Her expression shifted subtly. She hadn't anticipated such bluntness. Perhaps she expected me to still be the version of myself who inquired if she needed anything upon her late returns, the man who apologized for making her feel guilty even when I was the blameless party. "I made a mistake," she finally offered. "No, you made a continuous series of choices," I countered. "Mistakes are accidents. You don't accidentally sleep with someone for months and lie about it repeatedly." She looked down, then back at me. "I didn't come here to argue. I came to be honest." I almost laughed. "Honest now, when everything has already collapsed?" "Zachary blocked me," she added, as if I hadn't already documented that particular development. "He's gone. Deleted everything. No explanation." "You were never going to receive one," I stated, "because he never cared. You were the one who cared more, and he could sense it. That's precisely what men like him do. They prey on individuals who believe loyalty is something still owed, even after profound betrayal." Marla leaned forward as if attempting to reach some vestige of the man I once was, a version that hadn't yet died. "I don't want to lose everything. Not like this. We've had years together, Caleb. I know I shattered your trust, but perhaps we can work on it. Perhaps—" "I'm selling the house," I cut in. She blinked. "What?" "I've already contacted the realtor. We have substantial equity. You'll receive your equitable share. I'm not remaining here. Not in a place where every corner serves as a stark reminder of how little I truly mattered to you." For the first time, she looked genuinely frightened. "You're serious?" she breathed. "Deadly serious." She stood up abruptly, as if she might argue, perhaps hurl something, perhaps even cry. But then she stopped herself. Maybe because she finally saw it in my eyes. The part of me she had always relied upon to yield was utterly gone. "Do you hate me?" she asked softly. "I used to," I admitted. "But now I simply don't care anymore. And that, Marla, scares you far more than hatred ever could." She offered no response. She picked up her bag, walked toward the door, and paused. "I hope you find someone who sees you the way I should have," she whispered. I didn't utter a single word. The door clicked shut behind her, and I didn't even flinch. The house felt demonstrably lighter after her departure, not just because she had taken her belongings, although the shared closet was finally mine alone, but because the crushing weight of pretense, of eternally waiting for her to change, had finally lifted. The silence that had once felt suffocating now felt clean, honest, and entirely mine. I spent the subsequent days meticulously packing the last vestiges, photographs I had long stopped looking at, gifts that once held deep meaning but now merely occupied shelves like broken promises. I didn't resort to burning anything. I didn't smash any frames. I simply placed them into boxes labeled past and slid them into the garage. The house sold remarkably quickly. We had renovated extensively last spring. She chose the tile, I selected the light fixtures, and apparently we had made excellent choices for resale value. She signed her portion of the paperwork without drama. I transferred her check through her lawyer. I never heard from her again. No desperate texts, no late-night calls, just profound silence. And in some inexplicable way, that was the most perfect ending I could have ever requested. I relocated to a smaller residence, 2 bedrooms, one for me, and one for a potential future office, or perhaps just for the sheer luxury of space. I adopted a dog. Murphy, bless his heart, didn't adapt well to the move. He needed companionship far more than I did. His name is Tucker. He's a lovable disaster. Chews on everything. Sleeps sideways in the bed. But he waits by the door faithfully every single time I return home. One evening, while unpacking the very last of the boxes, I discovered something I hadn't seen in years. A handwritten note, carefully tucked inside a book I hadn't opened in ages. It was hers from long ago. Before the deceptions, before Zachary, before everything crumbled. If I ever forget what we have, remind me that home isn't merely where you sleep. It's truly who you wake up next to. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but instead I simply smiled, refolded the note, and placed it back within the book. Not as a painful reminder of what was irrevocably lost, but as a quiet testament to what I had miraculously survived. Because here's the truth no one ever tells you about profound heartbreak. It doesn't kill you. It reshapes you. And if you're fortunate, if you can release the bitterness, it meticulously constructs a more resilient, better version of you on the other side. I don't harbor hatred for her anymore. I don't wish her pain or failure. I genuinely hope she finds herself. I hope she learns to love without the inherent need to destroy. But her chapter in my story is definitively closed. And mine? Mine has just begun anew.